Welcome to Cooking with Benson. So today we're going to make a Bolognese. What I'm going to do is run you through the steps of making a good sauce, and then we'll add... Bolognese usually has a milk added to it, a milk component added to it to kind of get like a rich creamy. We're going to do that at the very end. So the first few steps I'm going to take you through making this Bolognese is if you just want to make a good spaghetti sauce. Bolognese is something like if you're going to make like a real rich lasagna, or in this case what it's eventually going to become is a eggplant lasagna. Bolognese is good for that. So we're going to run you through the steps of making a really good homemade cheap spaghetti sauce, just something you can have around the house. You can cook this and freeze it, pull it out, defrost it, add the cup of milk to finish off the Bolognese, and go from there. So, excuse the sunglasses, just had LASIK surgery recently, so I'm still kind of sensitive to bright light, but I want to do this video because this is what we're having for dinner. We're going to do an eggplant lasagna for dinner, and I want to show you guys the steps for this Bolognese because it's super cheap, super easy, and you can make it at home. You know, yeah, you can go to the store and buy those dollar cans of spaghetti sauce, but this spaghetti sauce doesn't take very long to make, maybe 30-45 minutes. Really kind of long enough for it to steep together and get the ingredients going. Prep time's probably 10 to 15 minutes, and beyond that it's super easy. It's a lot of simmering and cooking, but I'm going to run you through the ingredients now. Assuming you have most of these ingredients, the spices and stuff, that's one of the things that we'll go about in later videos is, you know, picking up spices throughout, you know, as you're shopping for just general items, picking up different spice mixes and stuff like that so they're on hand and you're not looking at that out-of-pocket cost whenever you cook something like this. So let's run you through it. You're going to need about a cup to a cup and a half of sliced celery. So this celery was on sale at my local store for $2. And that's probably enough to make double if not triple this recipe. And that's what's cool about this spaghetti sauce recipe is you can make a triple batch of this and just let it sit throughout the day as it simmers, and then you can freeze it and reuse it throughout the rest of the week or at another time. Maybe you got a special event later on. This is a recipe that's very cheap to make big and to portion it out and freeze it. So enough to make a cup and a half of celery. Again, one thing of celery is going to be enough to make more than that. You're going to need a cup to a cup and a half of carrots. Now keep in mind these we're going to peel, and then these two items we're going to slice. You're going to need two medium onions or 3 small onions is what I have here. You're going to need some olive oil, any brand olive oil. I usually use extra virgin. I got this on sale, this jar here for $6 at a local place called Ollie's, not Aldi's, Ollie's. It's a discount store. You're going to need some garlic. Now you can use fresh garlic. This is pretty cheap. It's diced garlic. It's minced, ready to use. You can get this whole thing for $6, and that's plenty to keep in your fridge. It'll stay in your fridge for a long time so that you've got garlic whenever you need it. You can use fresh garlic if you have it. You can use garlic powder if you have garlic powder. Whatever is to your taste. Now, garlic's one of those things I love, so we're probably going to use a lot more than you're probably going to use. We're going to need some red pepper flakes, not a lot. Now I'm using just regular crushed red pepper flakes. I do have some daddle red pepper flakes that I've collected over the years and stuff. Just whatever we don't want a ton, we want just enough to add a little bit of a bite to this. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Some oregano, some pepper, just regular black pepper, regular kosher salt, and then we're going to need some Italian seasoning. Now the oregano, and I've also got some crushed basil here, some ground basil leaves here. You can skip the ground basil and the oregano and just use the Italian seasoning. I like a good Italian seasoning, but I prefer a little bit more basil oregano flavor to mine. This has thyme, margarine, thyme, rosemary, sage, oregano, and basil already in it. So if you're not looking for a specific basil or oregano flavor, just a regular Italian seasoning. This I got at Ollie's for $2.29 for this whole thing. Again, spices are those things you kind of pick up as you go throughout whenever you find them cheap. Ground onion powder, it just kind of helps enhance the onion and give a little bit more umami flavor. This is just dried onion that's been ground up. Again, you can skip this step if you're using the fresh onion, but I use it just to add a little bit more oomph to it. And then you're going to need some kind of pot. My well-used Dutch oven here. Any pot with a lid, we will need a lid to kind of help when we do the vegetables, we want them to cook and kind of go translucent on the onions, and we want them to soften, but we don't necessarily need them to color very fast. They will color eventually, but we don't need them to color super fast, so that lid's going to help steam them a little bit and keep the moisture in. And then I'm going to use the mandolin. Mandolins are really cool if you have one. I think they're a great investment. I'm going to do a video on like top kitchen gadgets that are worth the investment. This is on my list. So a mandolin to slice. If you don't, you can just use a regular knife, which I'm sure I'll get out one of the knives I bought recently specifically for the cooking channel. 2 cans of diced tomatoes, a can of tomato sauce. Diced tomatoes like this you can get for usually 50 cents a can, and the tomato sauce, I believe I paid 50 cents a can for that as well. And then you're going to need 8 ounces of tomato paste. I've got to go pick some up. I'm going to go borrow some from my grandmother. And again, a cup of milk for the end. If you're just trying to make a spaghetti sauce, you can skip the milk and you won't necessarily see it. You won't necessarily need it, but you will need the tomato paste to kind of help bring out the tomato flavor in this dish. So I am doing this as a tomato sauce with no meat in it. Now, if you want to add meat, then what I would suggest you doing is the very first step, browning your meat, removing the meat, leaving the grease, and then with the grease in the pan, add your olive oil and follow the steps from that point on. I'm doing a meatless version, but let's get cracking, and we'll go through measurements and stuff as we make it. First thing we'll do is peel our carrots, then slice them, slice our celery, peel and slice our onion, get all of that prepped and ready to go in the pan, get our cans opened, get our seasonings measured out, and I'll tell you as I go through how much seasoning we use. Some of the seasonings are going to be specifically to your flavor, taste, your palate, because again, I'm going to like more garlic, more basil versus some of the other seasonings, but we'll go through them as we get there to them. So let's go ahead and get this stuff chopped up. All right, so first thing on our list to do is just peel some carrots. Got a little peeler. Just want to, just kind of get them off. Now, whenever you're doing stuff like this and you're doing a lot of vegetable chopping and stuff, always have like a little garbage bowl that you can scrape your peels and stuff into, and then that way it's all collected and you don't have to clean off your counter. But and then I have a clean dish over here, like a long dish that I'm putting my prepped vegetables in, so when they're ready to be sliced. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is top and bottom our carrots. Basically take the bottom to the top off. We'll do the same thing to our celery and our onions, so that they can. Wanabation knife that we got off Amazon. I did sharpen these up a little bit. I'll show you how to do that. But anyway, so we're gonna show you how these cut. Okay. Oh, not bad, not bad. Basically, all we're doing is cleaning off the parts of the carrots that we couldn't really clean up with the peeler. So. It's a carrot, so they're a little bit harder to cut through. But I mean, this thing's boom. Hulk this out. So we just want to take our celery off right here at the bottom. Same thing with this one. Plastic mess. And then just kind of look through it. Make sure we take like these leaves and stuff. We don't need those, so you don't ever have to cut those off. You can just pop them off. Like this piece is almost too flimsy to do anything with, so we're just gonna top it off. This piece we can't use because it's mostly leaf. Now these pieces like this I'm not going to run across the mandolin simply because I like my fingers, and I've actually cut this one, and this one recently, and I'd rather not cut any more fingers, to be honest with you. So we're going to be safe with the mandolin. The mandolin does come with a piece that you can put on the vegetables to protect your fingers. The only thing is for stuff like this, it's too big, it won't work. And so these we kind of have to do by hand, get far enough down on them, and then we'll cut them by hand afterwards. So put these over here because they've all got to be washed. Now, there's nothing special to cutting an onion as far as like how to keep yourself from crying. You know, supposedly a good sharp knife will do it. Supposedly if you don't cut the root, it will do it. But honest with you, just be ready to cry, okay? Real men cry. Everybody cries, especially when it comes to an onion, because onions are going to make you cry. It's just like their goal in life is to flavor and make you cry. And who knows, maybe tears make you more flavorful for whenever somebody needs to eat you during the zombie apocalypse. You know, I'm just saying. Tears might be good for you. Gets the, you know, maybe you're having a rough day and you don't want to cry, you're trying to be too masculine. You know, you get an onion out, cry, blame it on the onion. But sometimes you need a good cry, okay? That's all I'm saying, people. You need a good cry sometimes. That's all I'm saying. Get off my knife. Just peeling off. Peeling onions, that's all. We're going to finish cutting these up and finish peeling these, and then we're going to wash our veggies, and I'll bring you back and we'll mandolin some stuff. Real quick, side note. I am going to use a 14.5 ounce can of vegetable broth. If you're putting beef in this, you can use beef broth. If you're putting ground chicken in it, you can use chicken broth, whatever. I'm going to use vegetable broth because it's just what I have can-wise. And that's just kind of help add some it's to add some base flavor to it. So that goes in after the tomato paste goes in. You guys almost let me forget to put my apron on. Went to reach for my towel to wipe my hands off. I realized I wasn't wearing my apron. Okay, so mandolin, why I think mandolins are a good idea. They give you a exact, precise thickness as far as cutting goes when you need consistency. And with a bolognese, because we want these vegetables to cook at the same rate for the same amount of time to the same tenderness, we want to absolutely make sure that they are the same size. And what's cool about this guy right here, is you can raise and lower this platform to give me the desired thickness. If I want super thick, there's a super thick. I can go super thin. I'm gonna go, let's see, I've got it set to about a 2 here, 2 clicks in. Now what's cool about this mandolin too, with my onions, like let's say I wanted to dice my onions, I actually have the option to turn this blade here. Sorry, you can't say, turn this blade here, and it will give me some different size settings, and that'll actually dice my onions for me. Again, I'm not gonna lie to you, a mandolin is very dangerous. You can easily slice your fingertips off as easy as you can with any other item. So if you're gonna get a mandolin, be very careful. I recommend them, especially if you're doing a lot of slicing. So we'll get into like buying vegetables and stuff in bulk and freezing them. Even in this instance, so let's say I end up having more than 1.5 cups of my carrots and my celery, I can take these and stick them in a baggie and stick them in the freezer and use them again later, and then I'm not wasting anything. So I know when you're cooking on a budget, when you're trying to be fancy but affordable, sometimes every penny, every nickel counts. And so this gives us the option to save these things. So just something to keep in mind, you know, as far as like why I'm using the mandolin and stuff like that. So mandolin, a little bit more consistency as far as the thickness of my slices and stuff. And then for the really small pieces, you know, the celery and stuff that are only like this long, I'll go ahead and use my knife. And even with the carrots and the celery, once I get down to a certain point where I'm worried I might risk a knuckle or a fingertip, I'll continue with the knife on those. So, but I just want to let you know why I'm using a mandolin. Let me crank this a little bit thicker than these are my first few pieces on the 2, so we want something a little bit thicker than that. So basically you're just on the mandolin and you kind of, and you can see how quick you work through. So you want to be careful. Like you can see just how quick you can work through that carrot and get to your knuckles. So, you know, not even a 1/4 inch thickness. So these will cook pretty quickly. All right, so we're ready to go. We've got all our veggies chopped. We've got our cans open. We're good to go. We're gonna get kind of into the cooking process of this whole bolognese. Sorry if the light's a little bad right here. I've got you on my stove, so this is kind of where you see how low budget my show is as far as this goes. So I'm going to show you as we get the cooking process going what we want this stuff to look like while it's cooking, and then kind of each step as we add it. So the first thing we're going to do is get our pot on the burner. So we got our big pot here on the burner. Going to get our burner on high to start with. We're going to let the pot heat up for a few minutes, then we'll add our oil. And once the oil's added, we'll let that start to heat up. You'll know the oil's good and hot when it starts to move around the pot more like water than it does oil. So like if it's free flowing, then you'll know it's ready to go, it's good and hot. Whereas oil just straight out of the can, it moves like oil. Well, when it heats up, it gets more liquidy, it gets more, not viscous, but more, it gets a runnier texture to it, so it'll slide across the pan a little bit more. And that's how you know your oil's good and hot. All right, so our pot is good and hot. We're gonna go in some oil. About 2 tablespoons. There you go. And we're gonna let that get warm. All right, I don't know if you can see it, but our oil is smoking. If you need to test, just take one of your onions. You're looking for that sizzle. So I'm gonna crank my thing down to just about a notch above medium. You gotta love that sizzle. How you know it's cooking. All right, while we got the onions in there, we're gonna go in there with about a half a tablespoon of salt. Not that much. Get that on the onions. That salt is gonna help these onions, so as soon as you get it in there, get it stirred, that salt is gonna help those onions start to sweat a lot. So I think you guys are fogging up actually. How are you? Nope, okay, I think you're okay. Oh, my glass is fogged up though. So that's gonna help these onions sweat out some of that moisture and some of that, help it caramelize a little bit. So we're gonna cap that and let it go. Our onions have gotten some color on some of them. You can kind of see they're starting to brown on the edges of the smaller pieces, but they're not too bad off. But they have sweated out. They are starting to get a little tender. Then we want to add is our carrots and our celery. Again, we're going to do about a cup to a cup and a half of each. So, which is basically one big handful, a little handful, one big handful, and a little handful. Those measurements aren't great, but you know, when you're a home cook, you kind of learn everything. The way your grandmother did it. They didn't measure everything out. They just they knew, and that's the thing too with cooking. Like you as you get better with cooking, you tend to know just how much everything needs to be done. Now I did measure out the spices for you and I gave you those measurements as far as a cup and a half, each of these veggies. I did measure out the seasonings for you as well. So I went ahead and added those into one bowl and I will show you those, or I'll tell you those measurements when we go to add the spices later. Those will get added after we've added some of the tomatoes and stuff. So what I want to happen now is I want these vegetables to start to sweat a little bit more. Now that we've added the onions and kind of let their flavors meld together, I am going to add just a little bit more salt to this. Maybe a teaspoon. Actually, I think that was half a teaspoon, so give those a good stir. You can really smell the celery starting to open up in this. The onion already was, but the celery smells great now. So back on with the lid. I think we're at a good heat. I'm actually going to bring us down to just a click below medium. We were at a click above medium. And we're going to let this go for about 2 or 3 minutes until those veggies start to kind of soften up. All right, so we've got our veggies. They've sweated for about 3 minutes now. You can kind of hear they're starting to dry up. That's what you're looking for. So you can see you can definitely tell they're starting to soften. So now that they've started to soften, we're going to go ahead and add our tomato paste. Keep in mind for you here, you would add a 8-ounce can of tomato paste, just the full can. It's one of the small ones. Get it in there, and you're gonna let it cook out for a little bit. I had to make my own tomato paste out of a tomato puree, so just keep in mind it's gonna be a little bit different. So, and then stir it around in your veggies. So, now again, I had to use tomato puree instead of tomato paste because I was out. I forgot. Silly me when it comes to making videos. This is kind of what it's going to look like, your tomato paste. If you're only using an 8-ounce can of tomato paste, it won't look as runny. So I'm going to let this cook out for a few minutes and see if I can get some of the liquid to cook out and kind of help the tomato puree really kind of blossom. So I'm going to let this cook out for a few minutes, and then we'll go from there. All right, so now that the tomato puree has been added and it's cooked down and kind of blossomed up a little bit, if you notice, I'll show you. This is kind of what it looks like. It's real thick, almost kind of gooey in a sense. I'm gonna go ahead and add our garlic. Now this is where it comes to you, how much garlic do you like? We like a lot of garlic. So I'm gonna do about 4 tablespoons. Again, garlic to your preference. Don't garlic to mine. We're a garlic family. We like to keep the vampires at bay. So we garlic it up any chance we get. Garlic goes in almost every dish. Only reason I went with this garlic was because it's cheaper sometimes than fresh garlic, and it's gonna last longer in your fridge. So that's why I went with this garlic. So the next thing on my list that we are going to add is those tomatoes, the chopped tomatoes. Okay, so when they add the chopped tomatoes, I'm going to add the juice to the tomatoes first because that's going to give that juice time to cook down a little bit. So let that juice drain, and as it drains, kind of stir it in. You're gonna have to shake it because the tomatoes are still juicy. You may even have to flip it back over and take your garlic spoon that you used and push down on the tomatoes a little bit, and that's gonna help some of the juices kind of get out. And what that's doing is it's adding the tomato juice from the tomatoes into this mixture and kind of helping loosen up the tomato paste and kind of help it kind of spread out a little bit. So we're going to add the other can, the juice from those. That can was a little more forthcoming with its juices. So get that in there. And what that does is that cools the sauce that we're already cooking off a little bit and lets me incorporate the tomato juice into the sauce. And then it'll allow us to add the tomatoes as well. So now that it's starting to bubble, we're going to go ahead and add our can of tomatoes. And our other can. In there. And I know I said 1 can of broth earlier. It's not 1 can of broth, it's 2 cans. My apologies. All right, so the last things we have to add is the broth and the tomato sauce. So this tomato sauce, just canned tomato sauce. It's just kind of helped make it go a little bit further. It's not like a spaghetti sauce or anything like that. It's just literally blitzed up tomatoes. And then we're gonna go in with our broth. Kind of where we're at. It does look super runny right now, but what's going to happen is we're going to cook this and we're going to let it reduce, and while it reduces, it'll thicken up. All right, so now that we've got all of our liquids added, it's time for all of this to cook down, and while it's cooking down, we want the sauces and the seasonings to really get in there. So this is my seasonings. This is 4 tablespoons of Italian seasoning, 2 tablespoons of ground basil, a tablespoon of onion powder, or I'm sorry, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, a tablespoon of black pepper, and 2 teaspoons of chili flakes, and then a tablespoon of oregano, and that's just going to go in here. Oh, do you hear me cooking? That's my assistant in the background. I'm just gonna whisk and whisk and whisk and whisk and whisk and whisk. Now we have added a lot of liquid to this, so we are gonna taste it here in a second and check our salt content level. So make sure we get all our seasonings in there. So, and of course, once this gets mixed in, let it cook for a few minutes, and then taste it and see if it's missing anything that you prefer. Do you want some more garlic? Do you want some more Italian seasoning? Oh, bless you. Do you want some more basil? You know, oregano, what is it missing that's your flavors? So, and again, this has got to cook for a little while because it's got to cook down. Right now, it's pretty runny, but it's going to cook for maybe 30 or 40 minutes and just kind of reduce down a little bit, and then it'll be good to go. So. All right, you can see where that top red line, it actually reduced double that because I scraped some of that out and mixed it in there. So you can kind of see, how it's thickened up a good bit. The tomatoes are just kind of melded into the sauce. So it is good and thick. Add the milk. I'll probably add a little bit of cornstarch to help thicken up a little bit more, just for something what I prefer when it comes to the for the lasagna. But that's what it looks like. You could take that right there and make spaghetti with it. That is a beautiful, earthy, tomatoey, sweet, salty, spicy. It's perfectly balanced for a good tomato sauce. And I paid $1.19 for the carrots. Didn't even use them all. I paid $1.99 for the celery. Didn't even use it all. And I only paid $1.99 for the celery because that came pre-topped. All the extra leaves and stuff were already taken off. You could get it for a lot cheaper if you bought it uncut. So, what, $1.19, $1.99, that's $2, $3.20. So if you had to go out and buy the spices brand new, you didn't have any in your cabinet, Dollar General sells spices like that for $1 a thing. So you probably could have got the Italian seasoning, the onion powder, the garlic powder, salt, and the pepper flakes for $5. So we're up to what, $8.20, and we'll say, I know a can of tomato paste is 59 cents, so we're up to $8.40. No, I'm sorry, $8 and we'll say 90 cents just to round it up. Like I said, the garlic, I'm assuming you already have one of these on hand, but either way, so we'll say you had to buy a whole brand new one. They do sell them in smaller containers for $1.50. So we'll say you bought a small container. We're at what, $9? And we'll say $10.40. And that's it, right? So you got, that's, you know, assuming you have to buy anything else. So then we'll say 2 cans of tomatoes, and the 2 cans of broth. We'll say another $4. And that's, honestly, you can get those for much cheaper than what I just told you. So we'll say you spent about $15 on this pot of spaghetti sauce. This is enough spaghetti sauce to make 4 batches of spaghetti. It's almost a gallon or 2 gallons of, it's almost a gallon of spaghetti sauce. That's a 6-quart pot. So yeah, you spent $15 to make fresh homemade spaghetti sauce, but you can cut that up and use it for a family of 4. You could use that for at least 2 to 3 nights. So you figure add another $1 box of pasta, and for under $20 you've made 2 meals, and it's fresh homemade spaghetti sauce. It's not from a can. You know what went into it, you know how it tastes. It's specifically to your taste. So it is fancy but affordable spaghetti sauce. And again, you're only spending $15 if you don't have any of those spices. You're actually under $10 if you've already got a lot of the spices. So, and I think most people have these spices. So that's what I say, as you kind of go through doing your normal shop and pick up spices, because you're always going to have spices. You need good spices to cook with, but there's, you know, they're cheaper. You can get them cheaper. So Dollar General sells them cheaper. When Dixie has cheaper versions, their own brands are a little bit cheaper. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this bolognese. Again, I'll bring you back when I add the milk. And like I said, I'll probably add a little bit of cornstarch when I add the milk to thicken it up for what I want it for the lasagna, because I want it kind of thick for the lasagna. So, but I'll bring you back when it's time to add that and finish it off. But right now, you have a great, tasty spaghetti sauce. And you could take an immersion blender to that and make a great pizza sauce. You need to thicken up with a little bit of cornstarch first to make it super thick for pizza sauce, because I like my pizza sauce thick. I want it to stick it to the insides of my ribs. But anyways, I'll come back with you when it's time to finish it up. All right, so the last step for the bolognese is to add a cup of milk. I'm using silk milk for this because we're just kind of give it a creaminess to it. What I did though is I added a tablespoon of cornstarch to that to help thicken this up. So the first thing I do is bring this back to a boil before I add it. So we're waiting on our sauce to boil down, or to boil back up. So we want it to be boiling before we add the milk and stuff back. So it's there, so that should activate the cornstarch. So we just want to make sure that the cornstarch is really dissolved in the milk mixture that I'm going to use. And we're just going to add it. Alright, so as you can see, that's the thickness we've achieved. That is as thick as I need it for the bolognese sauce. Again, if you don't want to add soy milk, you're more than welcome to add regular whole milk. That'll add a little bit more fattiness to it than the soy milk does. I went with soy milk because that's just what I prefer. Hope you guys enjoyed this cooking video. This has been Cooking with Benson. We appreciate you guys watching. Till the next video.